There are teachings in the Buddhist tradition that do not arrive with answers, but with space vast, unmapped, unsettling. Suññatā, often translated as emptiness, is not a concept to grasp, but a silence to sit with. It does not cry out for belief. It invites us to unlearn. The Buddha did not define emptiness in opposition to fullness, nor did he use it to deny the world. Instead, he pointed to the nature of things, how forms appear and vanish, how feelings shift like the wind, how no boundary holds the self in place. In that recognition, what disappears is not meaning but illusion. What does it mean to see without holding, to care without ownership? In the early discourses, the Buddha spoke of emptiness not to describe the world as void, but to help us see it without distortion. The eye sees, the mind labels, the heart clings. Suññatā interrupts that reflex. It returns us to seeing clearly before the story begins. This reflection will not define emptiness for you. It will simply ask, what remains when you let go of what was never yours? 1. What is suññatā? The emptiness, not of nothingness. To understand suññatā is to walk into a room where all furniture has been quietly removed, and yet nothing feels missing. It is to witness a sunset over a still lake and notice that the beauty is not contained in what is present, but in what is absent, the absence of disturbance, of division, of self. In the Buddha's teachings, emptiness is not a cold negation of existence. It is the invitation to see what has always been there, but uncluttered. When the Buddha used the word suññatā, he was not referring to nihilism or a void to be feared. In SN 35:85, the Buddha spoke with the monk Ananda about the world being empty. This world is empty. Ananda, because it is empty of self, or of anything belonging to a self. The emptiness he pointed to was not the absence of life, but the absence of illusion, the illusion that things possess an independent, unchanging core. That which is empty is not meaningless. It is simply unbound. In MN 181, the Buddha guided his disciples through layers of meditative perception, starting with emptiness of noise, then of other people, then of villages, until what remains is the emptiness of nothingness itself. Yet even this is not final. As the meditator penetrates deeper, what is seen is not a vacuum, but a subtle and luminous field of dependent arising. When the grasping at permanence dissolves, the world is no longer dismissed or feared. It becomes transparent, interwoven, free-flowing. To see suññatā is to see that form is not fixed. Feeling is not possession. Perception is not reality. Mental formations are not authorship, and consciousness is not self. As the Buddha taught in the Fina Sutta, SN 2295, these 5 aggregates are like a lump of foam, a mirage, a plantain trunk, each appearing solid until one reaches out to hold them. Their emptiness is not their destruction, but their nature. This understanding is not intellectual. It must be tasted. The practitioner sits and breathes, not to escape the world, but to see it without projection. A sound arises. A thought interrupts. A memory calls. Each is seen as it is arising, abiding, and fading. The practitioner does not cling, does not push away. In that spacious attention, the world begins to reveal its naked truth. Everything exists through causes and conditions. There is no thing that stands alone. The Kakkanagotta Sutta, SN 12:15, offers one of the Buddha's clearest articulations of this insight. When asked about right view, he said the world tends to fall into dualities, existence and non-existence. But one who sees dependent origination, paticca samuppada, how this arises, because that arises does not fall into such extremes. In this view, things are neither eternal nor annihilated. They are contingent, fleeting, fluid. They are empty in the most luminous sense. Still, emptiness is not an end in itself. It is a raft, not the shore. The Buddha warned not to become attached even to the insight of emptiness. To cling to emptiness is still clinging. In Mindfulness 6, he says that even the most refined states must be relinquished. He does not conceive things seen, heard, sensed, or cognized. He does not conceive them as mine, nor delights in them. Emptiness is not to be owned. It is to be walked with lightly, and so. The silence of Suññatā is not a dead silence. It is alive with interconnection. When one sees that no form, no thought, no identity can be possessed, the heart relaxes. What follows is not detachment in the cold sense, but compassion pure and undemanding. Without the burden of self, there is no other to defend against. The boundaries dissolve. Loving kindness becomes natural, uncontrived. In this way, emptiness leads not to despair, but to intimacy. It does not ask us to renounce life, but to renounce the idea that life belongs to us. It is the deep, quiet understanding that we are part of a flowing totality, not separate bubbles. The trees, the clouds, the cries of a newborn, and the breath of a dying elder, none of these are isolated events. They dance together, empty of self, full of presence. To live Suññatā is not to live in absence, but in reverence. Reverence for a world that does not owe us anything, yet offers everything the moment we stop grasping. This is not resignation, it is freedom. This is not apathy, it is the capacity to love without needing to possess. This is not detachment, it is attention without bias. Perhaps that is why the Buddha taught Suññatā, not with declarations, but through direct experience. He led disciples into forests, into stillness, into breath. He did not ask them to accept emptiness. He asked them to sit quietly and look. And when they saw, they smiled not because they had understood everything, but because they had finally stopped trying to hold it. Emptiness, then, is not about deleting the world. It is about seeing it without the overlays of I, mine, and must be. It is the space where insight flowers, where compassion flows unblocked, and where freedom is no longer a destination, but a way of walking. 2. Emptiness in the Buddha's own words. There are teachings that the Buddha entrusted not to philosophers, but to the stillness of forests. Emptiness was one of them. In the Kula Suññatā Sutta MN 121, the Buddha did not begin with abstractions or logic. He began with space open, quiet, undisturbed. He spoke not to fill the minds of his listeners, but to empty them of assumption. For those who would understand Suññatā, it was not enough to hear the word. They would have to dwell in it. In this discourse, the Buddha instructed Ananda on how to gradually enter the perception of emptiness. He described a methodical, gentle descent, inward, not into oblivion, but into layers of reality, stripped from habitual conception. The practitioner begins by perceiving the forest as empty of people. He notices that in this solitude, something becomes lighter. Next, the perception shifts to emptiness of villages, then of the earth itself, until there is only the awareness of space. But even that is not the final truth. The Buddha leads further into the perception of what is not, until what remains is a profound clarity, the knowing that all these perceptions were constructions, arising from contact, shaped by intention, and marked by transience. In the Suññatā Sutta, MN 122, he returns to this theme, with greater urgency. The Buddha cautions that, unless one knows how to dwell in emptiness, even the most virtuous monk may fall into distraction. He speaks of monks who, unable to appreciate seclusion, begin to accumulate followers, discussions, debates, opinions. They drift from direct seeing and return to concepts. But the one who abides in Suññatā, who walks gently within the space where nothing is possessed, finds a refuge not in withdrawal from the world, but in clarity about it. The Buddha's voice in these discourses is not the voice of a theoretician. It is the voice of a guide. He does not say, believe in emptiness. He says, look here. What do you see? Now let go of that. Look again. The journey is not upward toward transcendence, but inward toward simplicity. It is a return to what is immediately here, before the mind divides it. Emptiness, in the Buddha's words, is never about negation. It is about not assuming. The monk does not look at a tree and say, there is no tree. He looks at the tree and sees, this form is empty of a self. It exists through causes the sun, the rain, the seed, the soil, and through those causes alone. There is no hidden core inside the tree that declares I am tree, just as there is no unchanging core in the one who looks. This is the deep silence of Suññatā, not a philosophical void, but the quiet dissolving of mistaken identity. Elsewhere in the discourses, this theme recurs like a gentle drum. In the Sunya Sutta, SN 35, 45, the Buddha declares, this world is empty of vacca, because it is empty of a self, or anything belonging to a self. Here, the world does not refer to the planet or cosmos, but to the 6 internal and external sense spheres, the eyes and sights, ears and sounds, mind and mental objects. The entire structure through which experience arises is conditioned, and because it is conditioned, it is empty, not of presence, but of possession. In the Kakanagata Sutta, SN 12, 15, the Buddha responds to a seeker lost in metaphysical confusion. Is the world eternal? Is it not? Does the self exist? Or does it not? The Buddha gently declines to take these positions. He teaches paticca samuppada, dependent origination, as the middle way. When this is, that is. When this ceases, that ceases. There is no need for an eternal self. There is only a pattern of arising and passing, like dew appearing on grass, in the early morning real, visible, but not ownable. The Buddha's teachings on emptiness are always tethered to practice. They are not metaphysical doctrines. They are invitations to see directly. The point is not to debate whether things are empty, but to observe how craving collapses when we no longer perceive things as mine. A cup is used, washed, put away. It is never grasped. A thought arises, is seen, and fades. There is no need to identify. In this absence of clinging, freedom isn't created. It is revealed. He warns, however, that even emptiness can become a trap. In the discourse known as Agi Vacchagotta Sutta, MN 72, he tells the wanderer Vacchagotta that views whether eternalism, nihilism, or even attachment to emptiness are like firebrands. They burn the one who holds them. The awakened one does not hold. He lives as one who has nothing, not because he owns nothing, but because nothing owns him. The Buddha's words on emptiness are not distant echoes from a distant past. They are instructions for today, to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to notice the feeling of wanting and not follow it, to walk through a marketplace without calling anything mine, to listen to another person without preparing a reply, These are not grand gestures. They are quiet revolutions. In the discourses, the Buddha often returned to the image of space. Space is not destroyed when things appear within it. It allows all things, contains all things, resists nothing, but space does not cling. To live in Suññatā is to live like space, not indifferent, but unentangled. You see the flower bloom and smile. You see it wither and do not grieve, for its beauty was never yours to keep. In this way, the Buddha's words on emptiness are both poetic and precise. They are not a denial of life. They are a call to live it without delusion. When the mind no longer insists on permanence, possession, or selfhood, the heart no longer defends, desired, or divides. There is just this unfolding, vanishing, arriving again. Not yours, not mine. Simply here. 3. The emptiness of self and the emptiness of all phenomena. A drop of dew on a leaf reflects the morning sky. In that fragile curve, the whole expanse of the heavens seems to rest, but just as the sun rises, the dew vanishes, not because it lacked value, but because it was never meant to stay. In the same way, the Buddha taught that what we call a self is a reflection, momentary, conditioned, luminous, and ultimately ungraspable. To say the self is empty is not to say that there is nothing. It is to say that what we take to be me is not a solid entity, but a process ever shifting, shaped by contact, perception, habit, and memory. The Buddha spoke often of this in the discourses, especially in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta SN 22:59, where he addressed the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. One by one, he asked his monks to examine them. Is this permanent? Is this satisfying? Is this self to each? The answer was no. Then he concluded, whatever is not yours, abandon it. Let it go. This teaching was not a philosophical rejection of identity. It was a practical path to freedom, as long as one clings to the idea of a fixed self. Suffering follows defensiveness, craving, fear of loss. But when the mirage is seen as a mirage, the mind relaxes its grip. There is space again. But the Buddha did not stop with the self. He extended this insight to all phenomena. The things we see, hear, touch, think, none of them exist in isolation. They arise due to causes and vanish when those causes end. In the Kaccanagotta Sutta, SN 12:15, he taught that one who sees clearly does not fall into belief in either existence or non-existence. Instead, they understand that things arise dependent on other things. This is, because that is the rhythm of the world, not solid, but interwoven. In the Fina Sutta SN 22:95, the Buddha offered 5 vivid images to explain the aggregates. He compared form to a lump of foam, floating down a river, appearing real, but disintegrating upon touch. Feeling was like a bubble bursting on water. Perception, like a mirage shimmering on a hot road. Mental formations, like a banana tree layered, but hollow. And consciousness, like a magician's illusion. Each appears, each affects us, but none possess substance. They are empty, not because they do not appear, but because they do not endure. To see the emptiness of all phenomena is not to become passive or indifferent. On the contrary, it sharpens attention. One begins to notice the finely woven patterns of interdependence, the way a smile is shaped by kindness, received long ago, the way suffering echoes from causes we did not create, the way a single kind act ripples beyond sight. Emptiness is not the end of meaning. It is the ground of compassion. The Buddha's teachings did not ask us to renounce experience. but to encounter it without distortion. When we see a flower, we do not need to name it, claim it, or preserve it. We simply see, and in that seeing, we touch its impermanence, its interbeing, its suchness. The flower is not separate. It is made of sunshine, soil, rain, time. It contains the universe. So do we. In meditation, these truths are not ideas, but revelations. A sensation arises in the body, tightness in the chest, heat in the face. The untrained mind immediately reacts. I am angry. I am afraid. But the attentive mind simply observes. A sensation has arisen. The distinction is subtle, but transformative. It is the shift from possession to presence, from identification to awareness, from self to seeing. When we observe thoughts, the same process unfolds. A memory comes. A regret appears. A story begins to replay. The mind labels, this is mine, this is me. But when we pause and look again, we find only movement, thought, image, emotion, all conditioned, all passing. What we find, in the quiet space between thoughts, is not absence, but openness. This openness is not barren. It is the field from which loving kindness grows. The less we cling to the self, the more we can hold others in compassion. We no longer need to protect an image, defend a position, or prove our worth. Emptiness allows us to listen deeply, to respond rather than react, to touch suffering without drowning in it. The Buddha once said, just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so too does my teaching have one taste, the taste of liberation. Emptiness is not a cold doctrine. It is the flavor of freedom, the freedom not to be trapped by what we are not. To realize the emptiness of self and of all phenomena is not a final insight, but a living awareness. It must be renewed each day, in each encounter, in each breath. It is not something to remember, but something to return to. Like space, it does not impose itself, but without it, nothing can move. And so we walk gently. We speak with care. We hold nothing too tightly, not even this teaching. For as the Buddha reminded us, even the raft must be left behind once the river is crossed. Emptiness is not a destination. It is the clear sky in which life unfolds, moment by moment, without center, without boundary, yet wholly present. 4. Emptiness and compassion. A heart that clings to nothing. In the soft hush before dawn, when the trees are still shadows, and the world has not yet remembered its names, there is a silence that doesn't belong to absence, but to fullness. It is in this silence that the truth of emptiness becomes most alive, not as a concept, not as philosophy, but as a way of being present without armor. Emptiness, as the Buddha taught, is not cold detachment. It is not a refusal of love or a flight from intimacy. On the contrary, it is the only space where love can breathe. When the heart is emptied of clinging, of the need to own, to control, to be right, it becomes vast enough to hold the world. In the Suññatā Sutta MN 41, the Buddha describes a person who speaks gently, not from fear, but because harsh words no longer serve. He is not bound by the need to prove, to dominate, or to possess. This restraint arises not from repression, but from freedom, the freedom that comes when there is no self to defend. When the idea of a solid self is relinquished, compassion arises not as a moral duty, but as a natural consequence. If there is no fixed boundary between me and you, then your pain is not separate from mine. When we see through the illusion of separation, we do not need to be instructed to care. The barrier dissolves on its own. In the Vātaganda Sutta, IN 361, The Buddha describes the fragrance of one who is free of greed, hatred, and delusion. This person, like a lotus in muddy water, lives untouched by the world's poisons. Such a one does not cling, and therefore does not close. Their presence is a refuge. Their kindness does not arise from obligation, but from understanding. The relationship between emptiness and compassion is not theoretical. It is something to be lived, to be felt in the quiet of one's own suffering and in the presence of another's. When we suffer, we often collapse into a tight ball of self. My pain, my fear, my story. Emptiness teaches us to soften that contraction, to look gently at our pain and say, this, too, is a passing cloud. And when we sit beside someone else's pain, we are not asked to fix it, to explain it, or to take it on as our own. We are simply asked to be present, to listen with a heart that does not judge or cling. This is karuna, the compassion that arises from emptiness, steady, patient, silent, free of self-interest. In the Metta Sutta SN 1.8, loving kindness is described as boundless, like the love of a mother for her only child. But that love, the Buddha implied, must be extended to all beings, not by trying harder, but by seeing more clearly. It is only when the illusion of mind dissolves that we can love without expectation. The paradox is this: to truly love, we must let go. To truly help, we must stop clinging. The more we try to possess others, to make them conform to our hopes, to rescue them from their path, the more we obscure the truth of their being. Emptiness does not remove love. It purifies it. It frees it from need, from fear, from self. In meditation, this truth begins to unfold. A thought of a loved one arises. The heart warms. Then the thought passes. Another arises, perhaps a resentment, a memory of hurt. We watch it too, arise and fade. What remains is not coldness, but clarity. The loved one, the pain, the memory, all phenomena, all empty of fixed identity. And in their passing, the heart remains open, not untouched, but untrapped. The Buddha once said, if one holds oneself dear, let one guard oneself well. But what is there to guard if there is no self to defend? This is not a call to neglect, but to transform. The more we release the story of self, the more we embody a selfless care for all things. We become like the earth, steady, receptive, nourishing, and impartial. In a world where suffering is often born from tightness, from the grasping that says mine, not yours, not yet, not enough, emptiness does the medicine. It does not numb us. It wakes us up. It teaches us to sit in the fire without burning, to walk among grief without drowning, to smile not because things are perfect, but because we are free from needing them to be. And so, the one who understands emptiness does not escape the world. They walk into it with open hands. They touch sorrow without owning it. They give without measuring return. They love without rehearsing roles. Their life is not separate from others. It is a field in which others are welcomed, seen, and cared for. In the end, the heart that clings to nothing is not barren. It is vast. It holds room for all beings, all seasons, all changes, like a sky that welcomes every cloud without ever being disturbed by it. This is the heart of emptiness. This is the face of compassion. Not two things, one unfolding. 5. Living Suññatā meditation. Insight and liberation. There is a silence that arises not from the absence of sound, but from the absence of grasping. In this silence, every breath is seen without judgment. Every thought floats like mist above a quiet pond, and even pain becomes transparent present, but no longer a prison. This is not a silence one escapes to. It is the silence one awakens within. And it is here, in this exact presence, that Suññatā is lived not as an idea, but as a path of freedom. The Buddha did not teach emptiness to be admired. He taught it to be practiced. In the Kula Suññatā Sutta, MN 121, he offered not a doctrine, but a method how to enter, step by step, into the direct perception of emptiness. Beginning from the ordinary, the practitioner lets go of the distractions of people and villages, of sights and stories, and arrives gradually at the field experience that this moment, just as it is empty of everything that the self wants to possess. This is not a spiritual high. It is a soft seeing. Everything is here, but nothing sticks. The practice of Suññatā begins with stopping. Before the breath deepens, before the mind settles, one must be willing to stop chasing, defending, performing. In meditation, this stopping is the most radical act. One sits, not to become someone better, but to meet what already is. One breathes, not to get anywhere, but to witness the rising and falling of this body, this mind, this moment without naming, without claiming. In this stillness, the practitioner starts to see how every experience arises due to conditions. A sensation in the knee is not my pain. It is a nervous signal shaped by posture, temperature, memory, attention. A thought about the past is not my regret. It is the echo of an earlier thought, triggered by the rhythm of the breath, the mood of the day. When this is seen clearly, a shift begins. The tightness of eye loosens. Experience continues, but ownership dissolves. The Buddha called this insight wise attention, yoniso manasikara, and it was not optional. It was the foundation of the path. In SU 12:15, he explained that one who sees with right view does not say the self exists or the self does not exist. Rather, they see dependent origination. When this is, that is. When this ceases, that ceases. There is no need to cling to views about existence. What matters is seeing the arising and passing of all things, and no longer being caught. Liberation in the Buddhist sense is not escape from the world. It is release from the misperceptions that bind us to it. When Suññatā is seen, one walks through the world like someone who carries nothing. This does not mean detachment in the sense of withdrawal. It means walking without the weight of expectation, loving without fear, acting without needing applause, dying without needing more time. There is a quiet joy in this way of living, not because nothing matters, but because everything can now be held lightly. A spoon is placed on the table. It reflects the light. It will be used, washed, and placed again. It is just a spoon, and yet fully present. A child laughs. A bird lands and flies off. One does not chase the bird. One simply sees. This moment is enough. Insight into emptiness must be embodied. It is not something remembered, but something returned to, again and again. It is practiced in walking through the market without calling anything mine. It is practiced in hearing someone's anger and not making it personal. It is practiced in washing one's hands, noticing the temperature of the water, the feel of the skin, the impermanence of both. In the Arivuttaka 49, the Buddha spoke of how the mind that clings becomes entangled, but the mind that sees clearly becomes peaceful. He said, "One who sees the arising and passing of all phenomena is released through non-clinging." This seeing is not philosophical, it is immediate. It is the flash of insight that reveals that even the desire to understand is just another wave. When one sees that even the path is empty, what remains is freedom without center. In daily life, living suññatā does not require renouncing responsibilities or retreating to the forest. It requires renouncing the illusion of control. One can speak in meetings, raise children, care for the sick, all while living in emptiness. It is not the role that matters, but the way the heart holds the role. Clinging leads to burden. Letting go leads to balance. When we see a loved one suffer, the tendency is to hold tight, to fix, to rescue. But if we remember Suññatā, we know that even suffering is a compounded thing, arising through causes, moving through time, dissolving when its conditions fade. We do not abandon them. We stay, but we do not drown. We offer presence, not possession. We offer space, not solution. And when we ourselves are broken, we do not collapse into why me or forever. We sit, we breathe, we watch. We name the moment for what it is: sorrow, confusion, and fatigue. We allow it to be. And in doing so, we are not trapped. We are in the field of Suññatā, where every emotion has its season, and none are permanent. The greatest liberation comes when we stop building a house in the storm, when we stop identifying with the waves and realize we are the ocean. This is not a metaphor. It is a shift in seeing that happens when we stop clinging to what is moving. When we live in emptiness, we do not fear change. While our change, we do not fear death. We are already dying and being born in every breath. The Buddha never described awakening as the acquisition of something. He described it as the dropping of what was never truly ours, the self, the world, the path itself. When seen clearly, all are found to be empty of fixed identity. And yet, everything remains alive, vivid, interconnected. To live suññatā is not to abandon life, but to live it with clarity. It is to bow to a leaf as it falls, to smile at a stranger without agenda, to sit alone and feel completely full. It is not loneliness. It is wholeness that does not depend on anything. In this way, meditation is not escape. It is a return to what is already here, already enough, already free. The living lightness of emptiness. To live emptiness is not to turn away from life, but to step fully into it without the weight of self, without the hunger to possess, without fear of change. Emptiness is not a void to be filled. It is space to breathe, to love, to let go. It is the quiet recognition that nothing belongs to us, and yet everything is entrusted to our care. The Buddha did not ask us to believe in emptiness. He asked us to see it in the impermanence of breath, in the rise and fall of thought, in the way nothing clings except our own grasping. And when that grasping falls away, what remains is not loss, but lightness, not detachment, but compassion, not silence, but freedom. Here, now, with nothing to hold, this is where the path begins,